You're not poor by accident. You're poor by design. Every system you interact with, every institution you trust, every piece of advice you've followed has been carefully constructed to extract your wealth and keep you trapped in a cycle of financial dependence. And the most terrifying part, you've been programmed to defend the very system that's destroying you. You'll argue for your own poverty. You'll shame others who try to escape. You'll repeat the lies that keep you broke as if they're universal truths. This isn't conspiracy theory. This isn't paranoia. This is documented, observable reality that's hidden in plain sight. In the next several minutes, I'm going to show you the poverty trap. Not just that it exists, but exactly how it works, who benefits from it, and why you've been unable to escape it despite working harder than your grandparents ever did. I'm going to reveal the specific mechanisms that extract wealth from your pocket and concentrate it at the top. And I am going to explain why your instinctive reactions to this information are themselves part of the programming. Because the trap isn't just economic. It's psychological. They've convinced you that your poverty is your fault, that you're not working hard enough, not disciplined enough, not smart enough. And as long as you believe that, you'll never look at the system itself. You'll keep trying to fix yourself while ignoring that the game is rigged. So let me ask you something before we go further. Why are you working more hours than your parents did with more education than they had in a more productive economy, yet you can't afford the life they had at your age? That's not a rhetorical question. That's the entire conspiracy in one sentence. And once you see how it works, you can't unsee it. Let's start with the first trap. Inflation. The invisible tax that steals your wealth while you sleep. You've been taught that inflation is natural, maybe 2 or 3% a year, barely noticeable. This is a lie designed to make you accept theft. Inflation is not natural. It's a deliberate policy decision made by central banks and governments. They print money, which devalues the money you already have, and they do it to benefit specific groups at your expense. Here's how it works. When new money enters the system, it doesn't reach everyone simultaneously. It goes to banks, corporations, and governments first. These entities get to spend the new money before prices rise. They buy assets, real estate, stocks, commodities at pre-inflation prices. By the time that money trickles down to you through wages, prices have already risen. You're getting paid in devalued currency to buy goods at inflated prices. You've lost purchasing power, and you didn't even notice the theft. This is called the Cantillon effect, and it's the primary mechanism for transferring wealth from workers to asset owners. Every year, your salary might increase by 2 or 3%. You feel like you're making progress, but real inflation, not the fake government statistics, is often 5 to 7% or higher. Your rent increases. Your food costs more. Healthcare, education, insurance. Everything rises faster than your income. You're on a treadmill, running backward, and they've convinced you the solution is to run faster, work more hours, get a side hustle, cut your expenses. But you can't outrun systemic devaluation of your currency. The game is rigged at the monetary level. And here's the cruelest part. The assets you can't afford to buy, real estate, stocks, businesses, those are inflating even faster than consumer goods. So the wealthy who own these assets are getting richer from the same inflation that's making you poorer. Their real estate doubles in value. Their stock portfolios soar. Meanwhile, you're proud of yourself for saving $5,000, not realizing that $5,000 buys less every year. You're saving yourself into poverty while asset owners are inflating themselves into wealth. The second trap is taxation, but not the way you think. You've been told that the rich don't pay their fair share, that we need higher taxes on the wealthy. This is misdirection. The real tax burden falls overwhelmingly on the middle class. And working poor, here's why. Wealthy people don't make income the way you do. They don't get a salary that's taxed at 40%. They own assets. When those assets appreciate, they don't pay taxes until they sell. And they never sell. Instead, they borrow against the assets at low interest rates, live off the borrowed money tax-free, and let the assets continue appreciating. This is how billionaires pay zero in income tax, not through illegal evasion, but through legal structures that you don't have access to because you don't own significant assets. You, on the other hand, get taxed on every dollar you earn. Income tax, payroll tax, sales tax, property tax, capital gains tax. If you're lucky enough to have investments, every transaction you make is taxed. The government takes 30 to 40% of your income before you even see it. Then they tax what you spend. Then they tax what you save. Then they tax what you invest. You're being milked at every point of the economic cycle. And where does that tax money go? Theoretically, to public services. In reality, a massive portion goes to corporate subsidies, bank bailouts, military contractors, and interest on government debt. You're being taxed to fund the very corporations and banks that are extracting wealth from you through other mechanisms. It's a closed loop of extraction. But here's where the psychological programming is brilliant. They've convinced you to fight over tax rates. Conservative versus liberal. Should we tax the rich more or cut government spending? This debate keeps you distracted while both sides maintain the fundamental structure that benefits the wealthy. Because even when tax rates on the rich increase, they don't actually pay more. They have accountants, lawyers, offshore structures, and loopholes that you don't have access to. The system is designed to extract from you while appearing to target them. The third trap is debt. Specifically, the way consumer debt is weaponized against you. You've been sold the idea that debt is a tool for achieving your dreams. Want to go to college? Take out loans. Want to buy a house? Get a mortgage. Want a car? Finance it. Need furniture? Put it on credit. The entire economic system is built on pushing you into debt. And here's why. Debt is control. When you owe money, you can't take risks. You can't quit your job to start a business. You can't negotiate aggressively for higher pay because you're terrified of losing income. You can't move for better opportunities if it means disrupting your payment schedule. You become compliant, predictable, and desperate to maintain income. This is exactly what the system needs. A workforce that can't say no, but it's deeper than control. Debt is also extraction. Every month, you send a portion of your income to banks and lenders as interest. This is money you'll never see again. It's not buying you anything. It's just pure transfer of your wealth to financial institutions, and the terms are structured to maximize this extraction. Credit cards charge 15 to 25% interest. Student loans follow you for decades. Mortgages are structured so you pay mostly interest for the first 15 years. The principal barely moves while the bank extracts maximum profit. Here is the mathematics that keeps you trapped. Imagine you have $30,000 in credit card debt at 20% interest. If you pay the minimum payment, you'll be in debt for decades and pay over $60,000 in total. The debt doubles through interest alone. But you can't pay more than the minimum because you have other debts, other expenses, and your income barely covers necessities. You're trapped in a cycle where the debt grows faster than you can pay it down. This is by design. The system profits from your desperation. Now let's combine these traps and see how they work together to keep you poor. You earn a salary that gets taxed at 40% before you see it. The remaining 60% has been devalued by inflation, so it buys less than it did last year. You spend that devalued after-tax income on necessities that are inflating faster than your wages. Rent, food, healthcare, childcare, all rising faster than the fake 2% inflation rate the government reports. Whatever's left after necessities goes to debt payments, student loans, car payment, credit cards, mortgage. You're sending money to banks every month just for the privilege of having borrowed in the past. And if there's anything left after all of that, you're supposed to save it. But saving is pointless in an inflationary system. So you're told to invest in the stock market, but you don't have enough to invest meaningfully. And the returns you get are modest compared to the returns that wealthy investors get through private equity, real estate, and business ownership. You're running full speed on a treadmill that's tilted backward and wondering why you're not making progress. This isn't failure on your part. This is the system working exactly as designed. Now let's talk about the fourth trap. The illusion of choice. You've been told you live in a free market where competition drives down prices and increases quality. This is theater. Most industries are controlled by a handful of corporations that collude to keep prices high. Look at any sector. Airlines, telecoms, insurance, pharmaceuticals, food production. A few massive corporations own everything, and they don't actually compete. They coordinate. When one raises prices, the others follow. When one cuts quality, the others match. You think you're choosing between brands, but you're choosing between products owned by the same parent companies. This eliminates actual competition and allows coordinated extraction. But you can't boycott effectively because these corporations own all the alternatives. You can't avoid them without dropping out of modern society entirely. And even when you think you're making independent choices, you're being manipulated by marketing and psychological programming that's more sophisticated than you realize. Billions of dollars are spent studying how to make you buy things you don't need with money you don't have. Every advertisement, every product placement, every influencer promotion is weaponized. Psychology designed to create desire and urgency. You think you're making rational decisions, but you're responding to stimuli that's been engineered to bypass your rational mind. This is why you buy the more expensive brand, even though the generic is identical. Why you upgrade your phone every year, even though the old one works fine. Why you subscribe to services you barely use. You've been programmed to consume, and consumption keeps you poor. Every dollar spent on unnecessary purchases is a dollar that can't be invested in assets. But you've been convinced that buying things is how you demonstrate success, how you reward yourself, how you enjoy life. This is perhaps the most insidious programming, the equation of consumption with happiness. You work to earn money to buy things that provide temporary pleasure but long-term poverty. And you do it repeatedly because the pleasure fades quickly, requiring another purchase, another hit of dopamine. You're an addict, and the drug is consumption. The fifth trap is the cost of being poor. You've heard the saying, it's expensive to be poor. This is literally true. And it's a trap that keeps you from escaping poverty. When you're poor, you can't afford quality. You buy cheap shoes that wear out in months instead of expensive shoes that last years. You pay more per use, but you don't have the capital to make the economical choice. When you're poor, you can't buy in bulk. You pay higher per unit prices because you can only afford small quantities at a time. The wealthy buy a year's worth of toilet paper at Costco and save 30%. You buy one roll at a time at the corner store and pay premium prices. When you're poor, you pay more for financial services, overdraft fees, check cashing fees, late payment fees, higher interest rates because your credit score is low. You're being charged extra for the crime of being broke. When you're poor, you can't afford preventive health care. You wait until problems become emergencies, then pay exponentially more. A dental cleaning costs $100. Waiting until you need a root canal costs $3,000. When you're poor, you can't access cheap credit. The wealthy borrow money at 3% interest. You pay 25% on credit cards or use payday loans at 400% APR. The cost of capital is inversely proportional to wealth. The less you have, the more you pay to borrow. When you're poor, you lose time to inefficiency. You take the bus instead of driving, turning a 20-minute commute into 90 minutes. You can't afford childcare, so one parent stays home, cutting household income in half. You can't afford tools and equipment, so simple tasks take longer and cost more. Time is money, and poverty steals your time. All of these costs compound. The poor pay more for everything, which keeps them poor, which forces them to keep paying premium prices for being poor. It's a trap with no escape velocity unless you can somehow accumulate enough capital to break free. But accumulating capital is nearly impossible when the system is extracting from every angle. The sixth trap is education, but not in the way you've been taught. You've been told education is the path out of poverty. Go to college, get a degree, get a good job. This was true for previous generations. It's a lie for yours. College has become a debt trap that enriches universities and banks while impoverishing students. Tuition has increased 1,200% since 1980, while wages have barely moved. You borrow tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for a degree that qualifies you for jobs paying $40,000 or $50,000 a year. The mathematics don't work. You'll spend decades paying off the debt, which limits your ability to buy a house, start a business, or build wealth, and you can't discharge student loan debt through bankruptcy. It follows you forever. The government made sure of that to protect lenders. But here's the deeper trap. College teaches you to be an employee, not an owner. You learn to follow instructions, meet deadlines, seek approval from authority, work for grades, rather than results. These are employee traits. You're being trained to fit into someone else's system, to make someone else wealthy. And you're repaying $100,000 for this training while going into debt that limits your future options. The wealthy understand this. They send their kids to elite schools, not for education, but for networking. The actual learning is secondary to the connections. They're rebuying access to networks of power and capital that will create opportunities their children could unaccess otherwise. You're buying credentials that qualify you to work for the people those networks create. Meanwhile, actual wealth-building education, how to start a business. To invest, how to use leverage, how to structure deals. This is not taught in schools. You're kept deliberately ignorant of the tools and knowledge that create wealth while being taught to be a productive employee. This is not an accident. The education system was designed during the Industrial Revolution to produce factory workers. Compliant, punctual, able to follow instructions. It hasn't changed because it's still serving that purpose. You're being processed into a workforce, not educated into wealth. The seventh trap is housing, turned into a speculative asset that keeps you poor. You've been told that buying a house is the American dream, the foundation of wealth building. This is partially true and primarily false. Housing has been financialized into an investment vehicle for the wealthy, which makes it unaffordable for everyone else. Here's what happened. Real estate became the preferred asset class for parking capital. Institutional investors, foreign wealth, and speculators buy properties not to live in, but to extract rent or wait for appreciation. This drives prices up beyond what local wages can afford. Simultaneously, zoning laws and building regulations limit new construction, creating artificial scarcity. Cities refuse to approve housing developments because existing homeowners who vote want their property values to keep rising. So supply is constrained while demand increases and prices skyrocket. You are now in a situation where buying a house requires debt levels that previous generations never faced. Your parents might have bought a house for 3 times their annual income. You're looking at properties that costs 10 times your annual income. The monthly payment consumes 40 or 50% of your income, leaving you with nothing to invest in other assets. You're house poor, with all your capital tied up in one electrified asset that could decline in value. But even that would be manageable if housing prices reflected actual value. They don't. They reflect speculation and cheap debt. When interest rates were near zero, investors borrowed massive amounts to buy properties, inflating prices. Now, you're paying inflated prices with more expensive debt because interest rates increased. And here's the trap within the trap. You're told renting is throwing money away. You should buy to build equity. But in many markets, renting is actually cheaper than buying when you factor in mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and opportunity cost. That money you'd spend on home ownership could be invested elsewhere with better returns. But you've been programmed to see home ownership as success and renting as failure. This psychological programming keeps you pursuing an asset that enriches banks and sellers, while keeping you debt-trapped for 30 years. The eighth trap is healthcare, weaponized to extract maximum wealth at your most vulnerable moments. You get sick. You have an accident. You need surgery. You have no choice but to pay whatever they charge because the alternative is death or permanent disability. This is not a market. Markets require the ability to refuse. You can't refuse healthcare when you're dying, so prices are completely disconnected from costs. A hospital charges you $10 for a single aspirin, hundreds of dollars for a bandage, tens of thousands for procedures that cost a fraction of that to perform. You can't shop around. You can't negotiate. You can't even find out the price before receiving treatment. You're presented with a bill after the fact and told to pay or face collections. Insurance is supposed to protect you from this, but insurance is part of the scam. You pay premiums every month, whether you use health care or not. Then, when you do need care, you pay a deductible, often thousands of dollars, before insurance covers anything. Then you pay copays for every visit and co-insurance for every procedure. And insurance companies fight to deny coverage, forcing you to appeal and argue while dealing with medical crises. The system is designed to extract maximum payment while providing minimum care, and you can't opt out. The government mandates that you have insurance or pay a penalty. You're forced to participate in a system designed to rob you. Medical debt is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. People working full-time jobs with insurance still go bankrupt from healthcare costs. This is not healthcare. This is wealth extraction disguised as healthcare. The ninth trap is time, the ultimate non-renewable resource that the system is designed to steal from you. You trade your time for money, but the exchange rate is rigged. You're paid as little as possible for your hours while being expected to be available constantly. Emails at night, weekend work, always on call. Your time is not your own, and the time you do have is consumed by necessities. Commuting, shopping, cooking, cleaning, childcare. By the time you've handled survival, there's no time left for building anything that could free you from the time for money trap. This is intentional. If you had free time, you might start a business. You might learn new skills. You might realize how trapped you are and start planning escape. But you're kept so busy, so exhausted, that you can only collapse at the end of the day and numb yourself with Netflix before doing it all again tomorrow. The wealthy understand that time is the ultimate leverage. They buy other people's time cheaply and use it to build systems that generate wealth. You sell your time cheaply and use the money to survive until you can sell more time tomorrow. You're a time mining operation for the wealthy, and you're running out of time to mine. The 10th trap, and this is the most important, is the psychological programming that makes you defend your own poverty. You've been conditioned to believe that wealth is about personal responsibility. If you're poor, it's because you're not working hard enough, not making smart choices, not disciplined enough. This is victim-blaming propaganda that serves to protect the system. Yes, personal decisions matter, but when the entire system is designed to extract wealth from you through inflation, taxation, debt, monopolistic pricing, education costs, housing costs, healthcare costs, and time theft, your personal decisions are rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The ship is sinking by design, but you've been taught to blame yourself instead of questioning the ship's design. This serves two purposes. First, it prevents collective action. If everyone believes poverty is individual failure, no one organizes to change the system. You're all competing against each other instead of recognizing your shared exploitation. Second, it creates shame that keeps you quiet. You don't talk about your struggles because you're embarrassed. You think you're the only one failing when in reality almost everyone is struggling. This isolation prevents you from realizing how common your experience is and how systemic the causes are. The wealthy don't want you talking to each other, comparing notes, recognizing patterns. They want you atomized, ashamed, and convinced it's your fault. Because if you ever realized the game is rigged, if you ever stopped blaming yourself and started examining the system, you might get angry. You might organize. You might demand change, and that's the one thing they can't allow. So now you understand the poverty trap. Inflation steals your purchasing power. Taxation extracts your income. Debt controls your behavior. Monopolies eliminate choice. Being poor costs extra. Education creates debt without building wealth. Housing is unaffordable speculation. Healthcare bankrupts you time. Is stolen, and you're programmed to blame yourself for all of it. This isn't conspiracy. This is a documented reality. The statistics prove it. Wealth concentration is at levels not seen since the Gilded Age. The bottom 50% of Americans own essentially nothing. The top 1% owns more than the entire middle class combined. This didn't happen by accident. This happened because the system is designed to concentrate wealth upward. So, what do you do with this information? First, stop blaming yourself. You're not poor because you're lazy or stupid. You were poor because you were being systematically robbed by a system designed to extract wealth from labor and concentrate it in capital. Second, stop defending the system. When someone criticizes capitalism or wealth inequality, your instinct might be to defend the status quo. This is programming. Question why you're defending a system that's destroying you. Third, educate yourself on how money actually works. Learn about inflation, monetary policy, asset ownership, leverage, tax structures. The knowledge that creates wealth is not taught in schools because they need you to remain ignorant. Fourth, change your relationship with debt and consumption. Stop buying things you don't need with money you don't have. Every dollar of debt is a chain. Every unnecessary purchase is money that could buy freedom. Fifth, focus on acquiring assets, not earning income. Income is taxed and inflated away. Assets appreciate and generate passive income. Real estate, businesses, intellectual property, investments, these are what build wealth. Sixth, build skills and relationships that create leverage. The only way out of the time-for-money trap is to build systems that work without you. This requires skills that others value and relationships with people who can multiply your efforts. Seventh, connect with others who see the system clearly. You're not alone in this. Millions of people are waking up to the reality of systematic extraction. Find them, learn from them, collaborate with them. Eighth, prepare for the system to get worse before it gets better. Wealth concentration is accelerating. The traps are tightening. The middle class is being hollowed out. You need to position yourself to survive and potentially profit from the coming changes. And finally, understand that individual escape is possible, but collective liberation is the real goal. Yes, you can learn the rules and use them to build wealth for yourself. So my people do, but the system itself needs to change. As you build your own financial security, think about how you can contribute to systemic change, because as long as the poverty trap exists, it will keep catching new victims. Your children, your community, the next generation. The fight isn't just about you getting rich. It's about dismantling the mechanisms that keep everyone else poor. So, here's the reality. You were designed to stay poor. Every institution, every system, every cultural message has been pointing you toward a life of financial dependence and struggle. But design is not destiny. Once you see the trap, you can avoid it. Once you understand the mechanisms, you can protect yourself from them. Once you stop accepting the programming, you can make different choices. The system is powerful, but it's not invincible. It relies on your compliance, your ignorance, your shame. Take those away and the trap loses its power. You might not be able to dismantle the entire system, but you can free yourself from it. And every person who frees themselves weakens the trap for everyone else. So stop defending your poverty. Stop blaming yourself. Stop accepting that this is just how it has to be. The poverty trap is real, but it only works if you don't see it. You see it. What you do with that knowledge is up to you.